What path was your life on before you met Jesus?
My perception was the hell I was living was just normal. Uh, my normal was drinking, getting drunk 5, 6 nights a week, making excuses to go out. Had a lot of self-hate, a lot of pain from my childhood, my adolescence, my teens, early 20s. And I had a lot of anger and rage that I thought was cool because I felt safe, protected. But then alone, I was shattered and spiteful and hateful and judgmental and a lot of heart pain. Didn't really care about anybody but myself. Marriage was crappy at best. My boys that I take care of in the morning when my wife goes to work were not served with love. They were burdensome a lot of times. Although I loved them, but I thought love was providing. But I realized I never felt love my entire life. Just the word you're supposed to say when you really like somebody a lot and you like their company, I guess. Never felt love. Didn't know how to express it or show it. Materialistic. I bought things to feel good because I could buy them. From coming from a place where I never had anything growing up, even love. It was going to be a short life. Suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts to people who had done me wrong. It was my way or the highway. And I didn't care what kind of destruction I left in that path. Miserable. Absolutely miserable all the time. Nothing brought me happiness. Short term. Instant gratification for things. Have a good job, that they respect it. Just I was good at my job. Who cares if I showed up hungover or if I was angry to an employee or basically just hell on earth.
What brought you to that place?
My first memory on earth, I was about 2.5 years old, and my father was a biker, and mean biker. I know a lot of cool bikers now, nice bikers, Christian bikers. But we lived in Santa Ana, California, and we were heading to my aunt's house. And I remember very clearly, it wasn't a story my mom told me when I was 10. I remember that story. And this was my first memory. I had to go number 2 at that young age. And it was at the point where I couldn't hold it. And I remember my father screaming at me in the van and hold it, to get angrier, and all kinds of threats. I don't remember the exact threats. And I couldn't hold it. And when we got to my aunt's house, he had snatched me up and stripped me down and beat me with my feces included. It left me in the shower, cold shower, and my first memory was hell. And I don't remember why doesn't my father love me. I don't remember any of that part of it. I don't remember anything after the fact. 2.5, 3 years old in that time range. How could I guess? That was a really painful memory. I even kept from my wife and everybody closest to me because I was ashamed of it. Like I had done something wrong. That was my father's way of correcting me, was beating. And of course my mom couldn't intervene because he beat her too and destroyed a whole house. It was in a rageful anger. That went on for the last few years. We moved back to Brantford. Moved in with my grandfather because we had nothing, no place to go. Well, when we left California, there was a mark on my father. This is the story now, so I wasn't there for this. He was a biker, was a brilliant mechanic, built custom choppers, and it was in the gang, so to speak, but he was a friend. And I don't know what my father did, but we were outside playing, and a couple of doors down, remember seeing a big old blue car pull up, and the guy get out, paid no attention. Then he knocked on the door and blew a hole through a guy's chest with a shotgun. I didn't see that. That was meant for my father. So I don't know if he owed money or whatever. So in a panic, literally that weekend, everything we owned and everything we knew that was home was uprooted and headed back east. There would be that stuck with me in a way that before Christ, having that bad dude attitude, tough guy attitude, my father was associated with the Hells Angels. It means nothing. But in my pre-Christ brain, that empowered me a little bit for some reason. So the beatings were normal. Too bad to get beat. When we got back to Pennsylvania, Bradford, my mom and dad got divorced, and or at least separated at that age. I was 6. So he wasn't around. And when I got 8 years old, when I became 8 years old, my mother had met another man who ended up being my stepdad. She was with my mom until I was almost 18. But that man had just been released from prison for murder. Another bad dude. Bad decision maker. But he only corrected my spanking a lot. He was a woodworker and a mechanic, so he could make custom paddles, drill the holes through so he goes to the wind. And I guess he had a smile now because I got a lot of spankings. Don't know if I deserve them or not, but they were blood dripping down your bottom spankings. So that's just where I thought what happened when you're bad or make a bad decision as a kid. And I made a lot. Fast forward, not very far, my mother, as I got older, I started looking like my father in his youth. And I remember from at 8 years old until I was old enough to stand up for myself to my mom, she was extremely verbally abusive. Literally say, without cussing for this, you're a piece of crap. You're just like your father, and you're never going to be nothing. I can't wait till for 18, get out, and just not wanting me. I never understood that because I have a brother or sister who didn't experience that. I didn't notice it then as I got a little older. But then I realized they didn't do the things I was doing too. And I carried that for a long time. I was just a piece of crap and unloved and unwanted. So I grasped onto that persona. A lot of drugs. And in my house, my father and my biological father and my stepdad, a lot of pot dealing. They were too quiet to tell me anything else, but you see things as a kid. And so my mother's punishments around 11 years old, not only the severe paddlings, seclusion, I couldn't go outside. I was basically her chore boy. She was not an active mother. To do housework and things like that, I became basically her chore boy at the house. And I hated that. Then hate really started to grow around 11 years old for my mother. And my home. And when I got a little bit bigger, pallies were not effective. My mom had switched to other tactics like starvation, keeping meals from me. And I remember being so hungry so many times, and we never had much food as it was, raised on the welfare system. And so we'd go to the Salvation Army and get our food pantry and get our block of cheese and powder melted, all that stuff every month. And then I tried to outsmart my mom because I couldn't beat her at her own game. So I tried to outsmart her and stealing food, stealing money to buy stuff at school once I got to junior high. And got bullied a lot because I was poor. I didn't know I was poor until I got that age. I just thought this was normal to have the same sneakers for a couple of years and just loosen them up so your feet fit. And, the hand-me-downs that are 4, 5, 6 times used was normal. The holes and high waters, and this would be in the late 80s where Jordans and all those fancy shoes came into play, and kids were brutal. So I had friends, but it was usually when I was being the class clown, I grasped onto that persona pretty heavily. Didn't care about academics, my folks didn't, so I didn't report card, progress reports. I didn't have to hide. No one cared. There was no correction. There was no guidance. So when my mom and stepdad started hiding money better, because they knew I got beat for it. The starvation wasn't months on end or weeks on end, but as a active growing preteen, a few days was enough. And had a dog that was kept outside about 50 yards from the house, a chain outside dog, And multiple nights, I remember one of my chores was to feed the dog. And I had we didn't have a bag of dog food. The dog got table scraps, pork chop bones, leftover mashed potatoes, things of that nature. And after my family ate, my mom was scraping into the big bowl to take out to the dog. And I remember having that dog dish as I'm walking to feed the dog. And I remember thinking, I coming to Christ and giving my life to Christ versus my belief in God. I knew there was somebody there because I should have been dead multiple times over. And I got the term down in my head of rescue God because I always prayed when I needed him, but not knowing who I was praying to or to what. This, my grandfather was a Christian, and so they were very strict at their house. And I prayed in front of me and whatnot, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember praying to the God I thought I knew, to not be upset with me because I'm taking the dog's food out of that dog dish, and I just want a little bit so then the dog can eat. So that was, again, more growth of hate for me. I had, remember running away the first time when I was 13 and ran and walked to my grandmother's house, who lived at the Bushdale Street Apartments at the time. Back then it was just a low-income retirement housing. And I walked from might have run almost to the golf course, might have run all the way to the tracks, and got there dark, and my grandma, saved me, fed me, and I never told anybody about the things that were going on at home. I just don't know why. It's just, I guess, keep your dirty laundry to yourself. And it would just be worse if I did, I thought anyway. So, the next day, my mom and stepdad came to get me, and I don't know if fear of me speaking out would finally happen. And they kind of laid off a little bit. Just still felt unwelcome. So, and there were some good times, and some great times that I thought were great because you weren't getting beat or starved or treated less than a human being. But I started doing what they were doing, which was dealing drugs. I mean, my first drug deal in the 8th grade. Stole some of my mom's pot and sold it to a gentleman, a kid in my grade, and I was able to buy lunch, because you had the food assistance program back then. You had a white punch card, and the cafeteria lead would punch it, and I had too much shame. Just another thing to get picked on and bullied for. And so I would just not eat until afterwards, or then be too late or something like that. So dealing drugs was giving me money to buy food, extra food. And fell in love with that business. Not hardcore, but enough to not have the drugs be missing from my home, and or my mom's friend's home, where I knew they kept it. That was a horrible path, because I did that, and then in my senior year, I became very active, and I always had a bag of joints in my locker, and they didn't have dogs or police officers in the school back then. But I would go to the games, football games, basketball games, and sell pot and what I could. And make 20, 30, 40 bucks and say what I could. About that time is when I really started to enjoy fighting, because people were cheering you on, or they were cheering against you, and then you fought to prove them wrong. I moved to Florida. My family had come up Fort Lauderdale because my uncle passed away. And he was a father figure of sorts. He was 20 years older than my father. Big age gap there. So he was able to help. He had a career. He was able to help a little bit and take us to family reunions. My mom wouldn't go, obviously, just us children. I'll backtrack a little bit there. With my father, my biological father, he has schizophrenia and severe. And my grandfather, being the Christian he was, which I didn't even understand what Christianity was, but I used to go to church, so he's a Christian. He would take us to visit my father when he was incarcerated at a young age, starting at that 8, 9-year-old range. Even though that hell my father put me through, I admired his being, you're my dad. He was just a big bad dude. I didn't know when he messed with him, and he was raising us. So when we did visit him, he loved on us, but then was enough not to make bad decisions to be in our lives. So it felt special to know that hour visit. My grandfather, once my father was released for a couple of months or a year, would take us to visit him and bring us back to my mom. I remember moving out with my father when he was on his medication on a house on Pleasant Street here in town, and I was 16 years old, and across the street was a frat house, and that was where I found tequila at. And I would hang out with them for all hours of the night on the weekends. And so it was, I fell in love with that party scene in a bad way. My dad was out partying, doing his thing, out of medication, having rages, typical schizophrenic behavior when you're not medicated. And he let me do what I want. Got my ear pierced, drinking, partying, coming home, whenever. If the door's locked, you're out. They care. And then when I thought my father was healthy, he had a couple of schizophrenic breaks, where he had to be institutionalized for a short time and get back on track with his medication. And my stepmom and I didn't have a great relationship, but it wasn't, horrible. And when he came back after maybe a month, I told my dad I wanted to go back home. I was old enough to stand up to my mom, and so I had money to buy my own food, school clothes and stuff. And so I dealing drugs, of course, and I wanted to get out of that situation because I can tell she didn't want me there. And my father had told her, he's going to move back on with his mom. We can't do this. He don't want to be here anyway. And I overheard her say, we're going to lose his welfare. And that just ticked me off in a bad way, because for just a short time, I thought I had a hope. It felt normal, some degree of normal. And then just realized I was just somebody else's meal ticket, using me to use the system. And so, again, heart shattered. More hate, more rage, more drunks, more alcohol. Back to 17 years old, my uncle had passed away. And my cousin, who was 15, 16 years older than me, came up with his family, ex-Marine, Christian family. We went to the funeral, and he must have saw something, signs of abuse or what you see in a broken child. Even at 17 years old, you're still a child. And I was trying to be a man, and he asked me if I wanted to move to Florida. I said, sure. My mom's never let that happen. Now, I'll talk to her, he said. And they had a conversation that didn't sound real positive behind a closed door. Kind of sure he was either correcting her or not giving her any options to take me out of the house. And that's before the laws of, becoming emancipated and all that. I had nowhere to go anyway, so went to Florida for half a year is all. And that's when my world really flipped upside down, because it was night and day to Bradford. 14, 15-year-olds were mature, but compared to my friends that were spitballing in the lunchroom at that age. It was just a fast-paced life. Ride of public transportation, had a job at a restaurant, a chain restaurant, making $300-400 a week at that point in time, making tips. It blew my mind, and I matured very fast, and not necessarily in a positive way, but a lot of drugs, some alcohol, a lot of women, and then I decided I wanted to come back for my senior year of high school and finish off. I remember having a bag of dope on me, and I was getting on an airplane at 17 years old. And I've smiled about these things because I can look back and see where God has been in my life, where he saved me, where he put a better decision on my heart and my brain. And I know he told me to throw it away. Now, I didn't know what that, it was just fear. But I threw it away before I got into the airport, because I wanted to have supplies when I came home so I could do drugs when I got home and have money. So I threw them away, came home. My friends picked me up, not my mom or stepdad. I had my friends pick me up at Buffalo Airport and came back to Bradford. And when I went back to school, fall of 93, I couldn't do it. It was just too constricting on what I wanted to do. I wanted to party and not go sleep during a class, fight. Just hated it. Hated being there. So I had skipped the majority of my senior year. I surfed couch because my mother at the time, they just didn't move the High Street. I forgot about that part. While I was in Florida, my mom had moved without telling me. My brother, who took a different path than I did, got in the Marine Corps and didn't make some bad choices, but not nearly as bad as I was doing. And that's where I came home, and my mother just had all my stuff piled in a big pile of junk in one of the rooms. Said, your room's in there. I opened the door. I said, this isn't my room. I just did one. Just was a hug. And my party friends brought me joy. I could be the man for a short time. And so I went to surf couch on my buddies' couches and their parents' couches with drugs and alcohol, and turned 18 in that senior year of skipping school. And I remember the guidance counselor, which there wasn't much guidance back then. No offense to the guidance counselors who were working then, but it was a different world. If you messed up, you had the principal snatch you up and give you a good shake and stop doing it. He told me that I'd have to go to summer school or I can drop out, take my GED. So, got kicked out of high school basically, made a decision not to go back. And I did go back and get my GED a couple months later because I knew you would need that at least to get a job. College wasn't pushed as hard back then. And I knew I wasn't going to go to college if I didn't even want to be in a high school setting. And that's where I had my freedom after I believe it was March of 94. In March of 94, that from in a year and a half, I did a lot of damage to myself, to other people. I wanted to be the man so bad. I got on board with the wrong people, and I started dealing a lot more drugs, where I was supplying people, friends of mine, from them drugs. And then, of course, they have a friend that can sell this much, so you give that to them, but then you have to deal with this guy you don't really know, and then he owes you money, and then so my drug dealer that I went to was out of Buffalo, New York, and made me feel like I was the man. He gave me a job as a wheelman. A wheelman is somebody that basically drives the drug dealer around because he doesn't have a license or what have you. And had the beeper, all the things that a drug dealer would need. And I would pick him up in Buffalo, bring him to Bradford, and he would have other rides from there. That's all I would do. He'd throw me a couple $100 and he'd front me a quarter pound of weed. I would chop it up and sell it 3 days, make a lot of money. To me, a lot of money. In the world today, it wasn't much, and it's really not for my soul. It wasn't any amount. And I did that a lot. And then I had, he also had ladies that worked for him. And involved in that life, I had to, at the time, Canada was a big prostitution in the Canada itself, Clifton Hill and Niagara Falls. The tourist attractions was a big prostitution spot. And this man was extradited a couple of times from Canada for crimes, and after that you can't come back, or they'll just keep you. It's $800. Whatever that punishment would have been, he would have faced. So I had to drive ladies across the border on a Friday or Saturday night with a ride, the car he had given me. And that would be in the afternoon. I'd pick them up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And they'd walk across the bridge because it's easier to get into Canada than to get into the United States. So they would walk across the bridge and be witness to all the negative things that a pimp and a girl that worked for him would go through. And in that, this is all in a less than a year time frame. And I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. I had no outlet to get out of it. I knew I wanted to get out of it because I saw a lot of bad things. I was robbed at gunpoint 2 times. I remember one time I was, this is where God was there when I didn't know it. I took credit for it. And that's one of the things I did a lot before coming to Christ, was take credit for things he did. And I had to face that, and it wasn't easy. But God made it easier because he's God. He forgives. I followed my new drug dealer that filled in for the time being for my friend, and followed him to an abandoned warehouse parking lot, me and two of my buddies, and him and two of his buddies, and we smoked some pot. Tastes great. Nice buzz. Let's do the deal. I had to get back to Bradford, and he reached into his bag and pulled out his gun and jammed it in my mouth. It's close enough for me to flinch and chipped my tooth right there. I still had to get it repaired again. And I don't care who you think you are, how bad you think you are, we have a gun jammed in your face. That goes away. Most times, for me, it did. Obviously, he didn't pull the trigger because I'm still sitting here. He robbed us for our money and took off. Rage. Once my wits came back, I wanted to kill him. And if we had my buddy's car at the time, and it didn't have enough oomph to catch the car he had, but I was going to ram him off the road and just die now that I was prepared to die. But I took credit of that. I just beat death. But now I realize God protected me from dying because he had a plan for me. And fast forward another month or so, I was leaving a certain road that many people didn't go down unless you were picking up drugs. And even the police didn't go down there. It was that dirty of a street. I had 6 people in a 7 people in a 5-passenger car, and I'm dropping off my drug dealer and his girl and his drug buddy and their 2 kids, which were toddlers, and the crap that I accepted. I pulled out on that road, and a cop car pulled up behind me. I've got a quarter pound of weed stash in my pants. Down low, and thought, I'm going to prison. Okay. Well, my 2 friends had their guns, and they weren't going to prison. That's when the third strike law in New York was just brought into play, and they were 2-time convicted felons, and third time's 20 years or double the imposed sentence, whatever it is. And they started ready to load up their guns and ready to shoot these cops, have a shootout right there. Nowadays, I think they call it suicide by cop, and have a name for themselves, notoriety, gangsters. And they meant it. And that cop car never turned its siren on, just the light. And I pulled over immediately. And something told me that was odd. Why aren't they out of the car? Why aren't they coming up to the windows with the guns pulled saying, get out of the car? And this is where God was working to protect me again. I calmed those 2 guys down. I said, I got this. Let me talk to them. They're not getting out of the car. Something's not right. I don't know if they ran the plate or what it was, but the cop car pulled out like they were leaving. They pulled up beside my car, and they rolled down their window, and I rolled down my window, and there was 2 lady officers, and the one female officer never turned her head off the road. She was driving. And the other female officer looked at me and said, what are you doing here? I know that was a guardian angel protecting me. Because why would a cop do that? They know why I'm there. They can see who's in the car. They can see it's an obvious drug transaction, drug deal going down, or just went down. The odds are we have guns and drugs on us. And I lied and said I was taking my sister and her boyfriend to their house just up here on the block, heading home to Bradford, PA. She knew. And the truth. And her exact words were, I don't ever want to see this car in Buffalo, New York again. And she turned her head and drove away. That is God protecting me once again. And that was my last drug deal in Buffalo, New York. Of course, I didn't give God credit for that. I took that credit. That's what I did. I just outplayed the cops. Look at this. It empowered me. Well, I turned 19 in August of 94. So this is from March to August. All this happened. Say it kept me busy. I see that now. And turned 19, small-time drugs, just living in an apartment and just enough to survive. Stole food, find a job at a factory and heat it after 3 days and just quit. I had no plan of any kind of life. So went through another 7 months of hell on earth, and I reaching out to people who owed me money for drugs and not being nice about it. And as I'm trying to get money rather than working, I broke into a bunch of apartments and camps and stole everything I could. Anything I could sell, I stole. And somehow somebody narked on me. And in March of 94, my apartment was raided and I was arrested. 19 years old. I served 14 months in county prison. Just accepted this to be my life. I was in with two of my friends, and the three of us together pretty much ruled the roost and on the block, so to speak. We were gods in our own eyes. Nobody messed with us, and the beatings I put on men there for the smallest things. Maximum isolation for that for almost a month, where they strip you of everything, every bit of humanity that you have, everything but your boxers. I didn't have a blanket because you can rip that blanket and hang yourself or whatever. So you had your steel bunk with a waterproof thin canvas mat, no sheets, because you're punished. And that was for almost a month. And it's supposed to calm you. It's supposed to make you a better inmate. And it didn't. It did the complete opposite. I played by the rules, but I still wanted things my way or the highway. For respect to the way you talked to me, to the way you looked at me. I fought. I got out in May of 1995, and met my first wife. That was the only good I had at the time. And so I pretty much ditched the drug scene because I didn't want to go back. And I had some friends that helped me out a little, gave me a place to stay, and started accepting these factory jobs I was doing. And in December of 96, we moved in together. February of 96, she was pregnant with my son. I was 25 years old. And now 25. And that really straightened me out because I didn't want to be my father. I ran from that at this point in time. Accepted any job I could get and really developed a strong work ethic. My ex-father-in-law got me a job washing cars at a local dealership. So I didn't have insurance. That's what it was for. Living on the system, still needing the system. And housing, paying for half the rent. And wanted more. I wanted more for my son. And I was going to do it the legal way. And after 6 months of that, I had befriended a salesperson, and we became great friends. And he was talking about money, and he was doing all these things. I had a house and 2 cars, and like, man, how can you afford all this? You know, and he said, you might be able to sell cars. You should give it a shot. I was like, God, look at me. You know, I was tatted up and angry and goatee, and I wasn't exactly approachable. And still had a bad chip on my shoulder, and a big chip. And so I said, give it a try. I interviewed a couple places. The place I washed cars at, which all they saw me was a lot boy that at 22 years old, that I wasn't worth it. I wasn't good enough. And okay, no problem. I applied at the competition down the road, and they didn't have time to babysit me. They said, come back in 30 days. We might have a desk for you. Okay, not good enough. I went back 30 days, went right to the sales manager. Said, remember me? You said you couldn't babysit me 3 days ago. You have time now? That he was impressed, I suppose, and hired me on the spot and said, if you can follow up with your customers and care about your customers as much as you care about getting this job, you'll do great. And I did. I did great. Taking credit for an ability to talk to people and care about their concerns and direct in a way to sell the vehicle. And began stealing God's glory. And as I started making more money, that sparked a fire for more. Still dabbling with pot, drinking a lot, going out those Friday nights things, you know, start with happy hour and then all-nighters, going to work hungover, fighting with my ex-wife, and it was just bad. And after 5 years of selling, I wanted more, and I couldn't get hired out as management, and didn't have the personality for it and the maturity, I was sure. And after 3 no's at the company I thought I was doing a good job for, they had said no 3 times, and I went back to the dealership that told me no for sales because they needed a finance manager. and I didn't know anything about finance. GED, general math, is all the further I got, but I was going to prove them wrong with anger. And I got hired on and failed miserably for 3 months. Lost the security of the sales job. I knew I could go back, but shame kept me from wanting to go back. Failing, because I had failed a lot in 22 years. Dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Hundreds of times. And then I remember praying to a God I didn't know, my rescue God. I prayed to him when I was in a car crash. I didn't die. Please don't let me die. Rescued me. I remember praying to God I didn't know. And I used to think, I don't even know if I prayed correctly, but now I know God doesn't care how we do it. Do it. And I prayed for the knowledge to do the job. I was so carried with the worry. I'm like, I'm going to get fired and lose everything. I worked hard for 5 years. If that's what you want, then just tell me and let me get fired tomorrow, so I don't have to know. I wait another month, look over my shoulder, and angrily prayed. Wow. And the next day, the very next day, I had the job figured out, the computer programs figured out, the system figured out. Everything was like natural. And I started excelling. Put God on the back burner. I did it. Stealing God's glory again for years. And that position paid better. So I wanted more things, and I kept buying more things and more things, and nicer clothes and nicer cars and nicer houses, and going on and on with that cycle of, again, doing it my way. Rageful at home. My ex-wife and I divorced when my son was 12. I had left because I knew it was going to go really bad if I stayed. And I had not seen my son for a couple of months. She kept it from me. There were some toxic things said because she was spiteful that I had left. But I know I was just her financial security. And prayed to God, to my son, to come know the truth that his dad loved him. But I didn't know how to show it. I would have him on the weekends shortly thereafter. But I wasn't showing him love. I was buying him things to prove that he could have fun and a life different than what he had before. And in that time frame, I met Missy, my current wife. Thank God for her, because I know now that God had plans for her and I. And still not with God. And we got custody of my oldest son when he was 14 and raised him until he was college age, and he's now on his own. But through those early years of Missy and I, drinking, battling, disgusting, not love. We loved each other, but I really didn't know how to love. And sort of didn't care if you need to love it a different way. I don't know what you're talking about when you tell me those things. So, in a nutshell, for the first 46 years of my life, it was that vicious cycle of brokenness and self-hate and judgment. I talk about God now.
Yeah, that's the next question. So how did you meet Jesus on the path?
On the path, in 2012, Missy and I got married, and we had talked about religion a little bit, and I remember enjoying going to church with my grandfather when he would take me on occasion. And I had, I guess, lied because I said, I believe in God, and I believe in something. But I couldn't believe in something truly that I didn't know, who I didn't know. And so we had talked about going to a church, but then that got pushed by the wayside by our lives. And I think it's been 7 years now. Would that be 2015, 16? Excuse me. Well, I guess 2012 is when we had started coming to Open Arms Church. And forgive me the dates, it could have been 11, 12, or 13. I was still a drunkard and smoking pot and going through a lot. And so Missy was coming regularly, and I was coming occasionally, and I hated every minute of it. There was moments, forgive me, I didn't hate every minute of it. There was moments I liked, but I couldn't love it because I didn't know it. Everybody that came across me was kind, but I was damning myself for my life. I don't deserve to be here. This isn't for me. I thought Christianity, you had to be perfect. I really did perfect. Like, how can I have a beer. It's crazy. Why would you not want to have a beer, relax? And I swore like a sailor, as the saying goes. I still like to stand up for myself, and I stopped street fighting years ago, but I still would, Oldie would show up if needed to be in times of needs, physically, the fighter, what have you. And I didn't feel comfortable. Kind, respectful, but I was just selling. I didn't believe that people could love me without knowing me. I still sometimes find it hard to believe that God can love me with what I've done in my life and his children that I've hurt. I don't feel condemned by it anymore because God is a God of forgiveness and love. But so coming to Open Arms, I've had for quite a few years, and going through the motions. Missy had given her life to Christ and was baptized, which I wasn't present. It was a bad time in our marriage where I didn't want to support anything she did, and vice versa. And I didn't understand it. And I listened to Mike McAvoy, who was pastor at the time, and as I came with an open mind, with an open heart, open mind, I felt like he was pointing at me. many times. That would scare me off. This guy, no, geez, this is bad. Like, it sought to sit there and be, what I was feeling was Satan attacking me and basically making me run. You're good. Your life is good. You got a job. You're not dealing drugs. You're not beating people up. You're not robbing people. You're good. And I stopped coming. In 2016, Missy and I had lost a baby, a first trimester. So I was really pissed at the God she loved. Bad. I remember going outside to my fire pit and yelling up to the sky. I remember yelling to the sky and saying, I know that I make her cry. You're God. How can you do this to her? As she wept. Now you see why I didn't think God wanted me? I don't know the words. I blamed him for things that I was pointing the finger in the wrong place. I knew Satan as the devil, but I didn't know the ability he had too to manipulate and push you in a direction that's bad, to make you hate God, keep you from getting to know God. And so that's that I stopped coming for quite some time. And I carried that loss, I believe, harder than Missy did, because she was with God. Regardless if we battled or if we didn't agree, or she always had this better peace. She can come to peace of sorts with things better than I could. And I just figured because of who I was. And fast forward through a lot of chaos, a lot of negativity. Went through a phase where I just didn't want kids, didn't want to try anymore. And I believe her prayer was working. And we were blessed with our 2 sons we have now, Nehemiah and Asher, who are 5 and 4 years old. And even with that blessing, I couldn't put myself aside. It was my way or the highway. I got what I wanted. And Missy was happy with the kids. I gave her what she wanted, and I'm going to do my own thing. So I was absentee quite a bit and didn't want to go to family functions and things like that. So I'll come over from a long night. And I was there in the mornings and took my kids to daycare and whatnot, but I was just going through the motion. I wasn't living life with my family. And so fast forward into, it would have been the winter of 21. The series Chosen, people started talking about. And my wife had asked if I wanted to watch it. And I watched a ton of TV then, so sure. I watched this, and I knew a little bit about the Bible from the one of my grandfather. And I didn't expect anything out of it. It was just entertainment. And my wife was happy. So I could do little things like that to please my wife. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with watching an actor who portrays Jesus work. And I started coming back to church. Still hungover sometimes. Still hate myself, but not feeling guilty because I just thought this was life. But my wife is happy. I've come to church. I started feeling loving to other people, but not realize it was loving, and believing they loved me when they said, "Hey, good to see you." Not wide open at all, just a crack. And still having trouble at home, and I knew coming to church would make my wife happy. So that's what I realized I was living. I coined it, I guess, happy wife, happy life, peace at home. That's one good I can do. As I said before, but I was doing it wholeheartedly. Pastor Zoe is now the pastor. And when I left, it was Pastor Mike. And I'm watching The Chosen come into open arms and listen to the Pastor Zoe speak. And I started to have these other feelings of, not I get what you're saying, like I did with Mike. I felt, I don't know, loved, like a mother would love a child. Care. Not that Mike didn't. I just didn't connect that way. And I remember telling Missy, that felt really nice. She may not even remember that. So between December, January, 22. Yeah. My mother-in-law had sent Missy a link on Facebook to a revival source called the Story Tour. And I asked Missy what it was, and she pressed play. And Alan Scott was the lead singer and speaker of the Story Tour, had said some words that were really cool to me that I didn't feel ashamed of. Are you broken? An addict? Are you... I can't remember now, but it really hit me. All the things he said I was, if not currently, in my life, and I carried it for decades. I remember and hearing those words, getting love and care from Pastor Zoe's words, and watching Jesus work on the Chosen. Missy had asked me if I would go, and I said sure. I was intrigued a little, but it was to make her happy. That she was. Excuse me. This whole time, by the way, as we're coming to church, my wife is putting her hands in the air during worship music and weeping. And I'm kind of freaked out. God, she hates me that much. Not God as in dear God, as like a figure of speech, because I still didn't know God. I'm like, oh, what's wrong? Oh, what did I do? What memory does she have now? And are you okay? I could bet, are you okay? We're all right? Just trying to take blame, I guess. She wasn't in pain. I thought she was in pain from a memory of what I caused. And it wasn't. She was feeling joy. I didn't understand it at all. I remember coming to church, but still being distraught because we were here for worship music. And I inadvertently would want to be late, so I'd have to be here for worship music. And she would listen sometimes and sacrifice that because I was still coming to church. So fast forward to March of 22, the story tour in St. Mary's, where my wife went to school. We walk in and sit down and worship music. Contemporary upbeats, guitars, and like here in a concert setting. And mind you, I'm 40 pounds heavier than inflammation, hungover, I believe. And in this time I have my PA marijuana card. So I take a toke of my PA marijuana card before you go in so I can deal with the social anxiety that I was going to face. And not get stoned, I had medicated. And I stood up a lot. And I was hit by a car when I was 17, and I have a chondromalacia patella. I basically have no cartilage between my knee and my thigh bone. So bone on bone, and 40 pounds heavier, and inflammation, and a bad attitude. I was miserable because of the worship music at first. I kept it to myself. And my wife is weeping again, arms in the air, knowing the lyrics to the songs they were singing, some of them. And I'm like, oh, I gotta stand up for another song. I can't sit down. My wife's gonna be ticked. And in between the songs, Pastor Travis and Alan Scott, they would speak. And I could sit down and relax. And I was listening to stories of imprisonment, drug abuse, womanizing, greed, selfishness, judgment, everything they talked about being free from, I carried. A lot of it, decades of it. Shame for my child abuse, I blamed myself. I could be ticked off at my parents, but I blamed myself. Even though I did a lot of good in those years of being out of the crime scene, so to speak, I still did it for me. At the end of the story tour, they had said one more song, and they were going to have an altar call. And I'm in good spirits. And I remember praying to God, who I knew a little bit enough to respectfully say what I thought was a regular prayer, which there's no such a thing. But in my mind then, I remember sitting there saying, God, please, if you're there, keep my knees from going into severe pain. Because if I sit down during this last song, Missy's going to be so ticked at me and not allow to ride home to Bradford for an hour and deal with that. He had other plans. The song started. And Graves into Gardens by Elevation Worship was the song. I remember falling in love with Rattle before that by Elevation Worship. That was the song. And I remember praying, which I was not praying. I called it pray peeking to see what's going on around me while everybody else is praying. Not knowing I was disrespecting God and the people around me. remember it, I still only cared about myself. And as I'm head down a little bit and I'm peeking like this at the people walking forward to the altar call and to the altar and receiving prayer, there's people lined up along the stage praying over these people and weeping. And I have a heart, I have empathy, even though I was made a lot of bad decisions. I sort of judging a touch bit by saying, in my head, there's a lot of brokenness in this place. Sorry. And I'm standing tall, feeling all right. I feeling good about myself because I had a career. We have our children. We have a home. We have a car. I didn't realize I was actually dealing with pain and brokenness just by knowing and agreeing with what they had talked about, being free from. I didn't know what it really meant. And this went on for a long time. And as I'm peaking, more people are walking up, and I'm just turning my head away. Man, there's a lot of brokenness in Elk County. Never coming back here for my wife's run, so I'm making jokes in my own head to find humor in this. And I kept saying in my head, I'm good. Gosh, I'm good. I'm glad I'm good. And I remember looking up just like this. Aren't I? That's when I met God. Standing there, the lower half of my body, from my butt to my toes, went into a spasm, a physical spasm that I couldn't move. Like God was telling me to stand right here and let me show you where you're not, and let me show you what I can do. And I remember a little bit of consciousness, like what is going on? And then letting it go. The voice said, stop thinking. And I was squeezing Missy's hand, and I can't look. I can't open my eyes. I can't peek. And I'm thinking that something bad's happening right now. Like in my physical body, something's happening. Like am I going to go into a seizure next? I don't know what's going on. And I was trembling. And this is all happened very fast. I started feeling a grasp on my legs and a pain on my knees like I had never felt before, even when I first got hit by that car. And I wanted to pray for it to go away to my rescue guide, a God I didn't know. And I felt pressure on my ankles, up my calves, my shins, my knees, and my thighs, and my butt, like something was forcing me to sit down. The pain was so severe, I didn't know how I couldn't sit down. I wanted to sit down from the pain. And I remember trying to lift my head. And I remember thinking, I just want to pray to you to take this pain away. I now realize that when I peeked at God, I said, aren't I? He knew that that was as close as I was going to get to being on my knees and asking for forgiveness. for the life I led. So when I wanted to pray to God, and I couldn't, I remember saying, I just want to pray you to take the pain away. As soon as I thought that, he started showing me visions of my childhood. At the first memory in this world of being beat and smeared with feces at 2.5 years old. I condemned God for that. Why weren't you there for me? And he showed me an image of him and Jesus, as Jesus, man on earth, the Jesus I know, the Jesus from The Chosen. In the corner weeping for me. It made me think, I don't know who got me out of that bathtub. I don't know who cleaned me out. Jesus did. He started showing me more of every bad part of my life, and he showed me where he was. Most of the time, he was in the corner, weeping, watching me destroy my life. Never wanted to know him. And that, it seemed like it went on for eternity. I'm squeezing Missy's hand so hard I thought I was going to break. I really kept like holding on to a little bit of consciousness. And when he showed me screaming at him for loss of our unborn child, to my life and decision making, he was weeping. I don't weep now because I feel the guilt and condemnation of doing bad. I'm having memories of what God took from me and healed me from. So yeah, when I said I want to pray to you to take this pain away, I meant my physical pain that I believe Satan was causing to make me sit down. You're good. Look what I provided you with. He was taking my pain away. And he did. When that encounter ended, I literally was exhausted. I felt a weight off my shoulders and chest and neck and head I didn't know I was carrying. And I went, oh yeah. And I didn't know what was going on. I am looking around and I instantly feel differently. Instantly feel relieved. I could breathe. I don't have to lie. I don't have to be ashamed. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't wish Gabe is here today. I became a child of God and I gave my life to Christ that night. In my thoughts, I'm yours. And I fell in love with worship music. I left in awe that he will speak. I'm sure Missy must have thought I was upset about something or weeping about my past, because I did that often. You know, when you have horrible night terrors for 30 years, you have a lot of daytime nightmares too. And I had did tell her what had happened. She's saying goodbye to the people she knows, and we're getting ready to go to the car. And as we're walking to the car, even I didn't know what happened. So I couldn't explain it. I didn't have the words to explain it other than that was amazing. It was like a high I've never been on. I had no knee pain. I had no mental pain. I felt joy. Satan attacked me immediately. He knew what just happened, obviously. He gets to witness that too. I had to realize it was Satan attacking me. But then it was over very quickly. And I remember coming to church the following morning. This is where God's word is really cool to me. And I always see it in the hindsight, not always in the moment. And somebody who I knew really well was Mike Paternetti. And he was the first one I saw, and I latched on to him. I came to God last night. I don't remember my exact words, but that was the meat and potatoes of it. I came to God last night. Let me tell you what God did. And I remember seeing my wife smile so big. It was the answer to her prayer. And from what I found out, it was the answer to dozens of people's prayers here at the church. And I'm rambling to Mike. I grew up with his boys, so I knew Mike well, and he knew some of my past, and was always loving. And he just starts crying, and we're crying in the break of the cup of the coffee, and he's overjoyed with what I'm telling him. I'm overjoyed to tell him. Excuse me, a joy, a real joy. I'm loving this. And it wasn't at the time to make my father in heaven proud. I didn't know him quite just yet. I was just introduced. Well, that introduction, I wanted more. And as I'm telling him this, he says to me, "You've got to go tell Dean Williams." I was like, "Why?" "Why? What do you mean?" And I know you, I'm telling you, I know you. I don't know him that well. I know enough. He doesn't need me to come bother him. See, Dan's a brother of mine. And now with Christ. And I didn't know his story. Didn't know his walk. Didn't know his coming to Christ. And so I brushed off that statement that Mike said, and I continued with my story. When I get towards the end, "You got to tell Dan Williams." I said in my head, "Oh, well, thank you. Why? What are you doing? Why are you telling me to do this?" God was telling Mike to tell me that. So Missy and I go sit down. I'm full of God. I am just full of Holy Spirit, which I didn't know well, but I knew the Spirit of God was in me. And I remember sitting there as Pastor Zoe is talking. I want to tell the world what I'm filled with the Holy Spirit from the night before. I was sitting there peeking back at Dan Williams. He's still there. And the boys told me to go tell. You hear the voice kind of freaked me out just a little bit, an actual audible voice in my head. And I said to Missy, I'm not telling Dan Williams. I don't know him. I can't go just talk to him. Stranger, what? And she called me and whatever she said, I don't remember. And another 15 minutes goes by, close to the end of Pastor Zoe's sermon. I'd be back. He's still there. He's not leaving. He's not leaving early for nothing. He's there. And I'm not telling Dan Williams. I said to Missy again, go tell. And I was scared. Why? Why am I being told to do this? I'm not to be judged. Am I easy to think I'm a lunatic? Not knowing where he is at with God. I know now. But this is a perfect stranger to me. I heard the voice again. Just obey me. Just obey me. I'm here. And I was calm. We stood up. We had worship at the end of church at the time. Worship music. And I liked it. Don't remember the song. I leaned over to my wife and said, I'm going to catch Dan before he leaves. I have to obey. Not knowing what I was signing up for. And I don't use the word obey. So I was repeating what God had told me. She said, okay. And I remember putting my jacket on her, rushing over to him and saying, Dan Williams, Gabe Chamberlin. Okay. I gave my life to God last night, and I was telling Mike Paternity at the door, and I don't know why he told me to tell you. Do you have a few minutes? I don't remember the exact answer, but I don't think he necessarily had a few minutes in that moment. And I think I repeated myself. And he said, okay, go ahead. And I shared the story from the story tour, which basically was the first time I ever felt love in my life. God loves me. And as I'm telling them the story of Satan causing that pain on my legs, from you judging, peeking, to redemption, and God saying, I got you. And I believe. And Dan's weeping, and I'm weeping. And he left. And then I see Richie Dennison, who I've known worked with for years in the car business. He's been a friend and a customer for many years. And I said, Richie was trying to wrap things up at the end of church. Richie, you had a few minutes. Well, I'm actually in the middle. No. Do you have a few minutes? I've got to tell you something. Okay. And I just told the story again. And Mike Patterhead came over, and we must have talked for 2 hours in the church, because I was able to share some of what led me to go to the story tour, the brokenness. And Richie knew a lot because I followed him when he was in the rock bands in town, in the bar scene. I followed his band a lot. And tears of joy. I still didn't quite get it. I thought my brokenness and then was kind of touching their hearts, but it was them knowing that I accepted God as my Lord and Savior, my Father, a father I denied over and over again in my life. And it'll be 1 year this March 26th, anniversary with God. There's a movie title for you. The anniversary with God. Going to talk about what God's done that year.
Yeah. So what's life like on the path with Jesus now?
It's amazing. It's completely the opposite of what it was. I have the polar opposite of what I used to have. Where I had hate, I now have love. Where I had judgment, I have compassion. Where I had selfishness, I have generosity. I've learned through the Bible and Bible studies and spending time with my wife. My wife actually explained the gifts to me and read to me one night. All through this past year, not perfection. Still had a hard time if I was good enough at times. And I realized that's Satan still attacking, but now I have God to go to. And because I'm a stubborn bullhead that waited 46 years to accept God as my Lord and Savior, I still sometimes think I have it figured out until the next day. I don't get quite to 3 days anymore. I collapse with worship music, prayer, because worshiping God is praising God. And you can pray and praise God instead of just ask for something. And I love praising God for the things He's done for me. I instantly, the night terrors went away. Instantly. And these were bad. These were scary night terrors where I would sleepwalk and rage in my sleep. Paranoia that somebody was going to hurt my children, nightmares of my children getting hurt. So I was always locking the doors twice, getting up after falling asleep for 2 hours. Night terror wake me up, go check every door, checking my kids. The bad thoughts about other people, where if somebody cut me off on the road, I would hate them to the core. But God took all that. There's nothing He didn't take. Being able to argue with my wife when we don't agree on something without being a complete a-hole, and I'm out of here and go to a bar and drink away at night. He gave me the ability to think things through calmly in all things. My decision making is now for His glory first. That's the least I can do for what He's done for me. I have been blessed to be surrounded by men of God who have helped me learn more about the Bible. God took away TV from me because one of my best things I could do was be out all weekend long and sleep on it and lay on the couch for 15 hours on a Sunday, hungover, and watch football and do nothing. The movies I watched were not always the best, and they were not G-rated. They were gangster movies and the things that I've done in my life, in my past life, and I would resonate to that person almost, like, yeah, get over whatever it may be. Loved horror movies. Don't anymore. I don't love any TV, unfortunately, for my wife because she still has to watch TV a little bit. We were just talking about this the other night. I want to be doing something. I want to be active in my home, doing something. I want to put time into my Bible study in the morning. I want to spend time with my family. I annoy my wife with that, but now I don't go away. But laughter's real. My joy is real. My love is real. And being able to feel loved by a man who died for me, how could I not want to repay that? I sin, I slip, I fall. But I don't go into depression. Took depression away. Took anxiety away. I need a water real quick. Is there water here?
Oh, yeah.
I had a spot
Over here.
Yeah,
That's it.
all right.
Whoa. My knees.
There we go. Thanks. Talking too much, get cottonmouth. I'd rather have cottonmouth than talking about Jesus so much. Smoking box. So, I don't have it figured out. I don't have it, meaning my walk with Christ, figured out. I hope I never do, to be honest with you, because I love learning about God and what other people can show me. Filter through the conversation and accept what God gives me to accept as a child of God. Forgiveness, having shame for all of those dirty deeds I did. I carry. When I say carry, I actually thought about them. When I would be in Buffalo, New York with my wife, I might think about that random street that I used to go to and not feel proud about it, but I feel shame for my behavior. And having the confidence to talk about God, a living, breathing God that could change anything in a moment's notice. When God says move, that mountain moves. I don't always agree with this time, but then I realize I'm asking probably something for myself I don't really need done in that moment. God's time is perfect. But the social anxiety is taken away. For the first few months of my walk, I still had my legal marijuana card. So what he took away from a physical standpoint, I stopped drinking immediately. I had no desire. I would go to the bar. When I say stop drinking, stop wanting to drink. I would have a drink, and something was tugging on my heart to go home. I stayed for half an hour and say, see ya. I go home, and I felt joy being home. And they said, you could talk about God together. That's one thing where neither one of us could be right on. God is right. And if you're talking about God, they're doing okay. Compared to what we used to talk about. And alcohol, street drunks, my legal marijuana pen I held on to. But I don't know why I justified it as, well, it's law. I'm not breaking the law. No, I wasn't. But in my walk with Christ, I've been blessed to stand side by side with Dan Williams in men's group and another group, Breaking Chains, and talk about recovery. And it started to be put heavy on my heart. You don't have a right, you have a legal marijuana card. Not condemning as you're a horrible person again, look at you fail. It wasn't like the attacks I used to get. That's when I knew it was love from Christ telling me, do you really need it? I took away your knee pain, which he did. No knee pain. 0 knee pain. Carried this pain, medically diagnosed, x-ray performed from when I was 18 until I was 46. Don't get me wrong, being 47, if I squat on the floor with my 5-year-old and 4-year-old in play, it does hurt when I stand up. But the constant throbbing pain where I would eat a pain pill or hit my weed pen or just sit down and be lazy. And my knee hurts. My knees. I turned down so much life because of blaming my knees. Took that pain away. Physical pain. About 3 months into my walk, maybe 2 months, 3 months, I can't remember exactly, I started to hate drinking. It was 0 fun for me. I was miserable when I went out because I was away from my family and I yearned to be home, which is obviously what God wanted for me. So then in August, I stopped going to the bars, which was my bar at the time, which we could talk about that another day. But that's what was hard to walk away from, my own bar. But back to the legal marijuana. I remember praying to God one night because I was feeling a tugging on my heart to stop using it. My knee pain is gone. That was my biggest reason to get it, and my anxiety was gone. So why am I doing? I did it a lot less. I used it a lot less, but why did I do it? And I remember praying to God before I went to sleep. I feel you don't care about Pennsylvania legal marijuana law. I know you have plans for me. If you're cool with this, I'll be cool with it. If you don't want me to do it, just say so. And it's done. Now, I just smoked marijuana since I was 11 years old. Recreationally, then abusively, then recreationally, then abusively, and then medically. Off and on. A year off here, you know what I mean? Things like that when your life changes. God's happy right now. Really happy. I had my pen on my nightstand. I hit it before I went to sleep. I hit it before or when I woke up. And then, because even laying in bed, the pain hurt. My knees hurt. I apologize. My knees hurt. And I remember getting up the next morning, grabbing my pen, push a little button, make sure the light came on. It was on. Zero effect. I just thought it was a bad cartridge that I bought. Whatever, I'll return it to the store and get a new one. Forgetting about my prayer the night before. I go to work, do this, do that. Midday, I go up to my truck and I just take just because it's had it. It was normal. That was God's answer. My pen was perfectly fine. The battery was charged, the cartridge was filled. God said no. He didn't want that for me. Why, I don't know, other than the fact that I am more clear. I have no knee pain. I have no anxiety. So what's the sense? Took away the 3 years of marijuana usage. When I asked him what he wanted. Like that. No alcohol. My wife and I do a drink glass of wine here or there. But after one or two, we're relaxed. That's enjoyable. But that's it. There's no, before I was the guy that would drink a couple shots of Fireball out of the freezer before I went out to get primed. I want to be up with my children in the morning. I don't want to be less than on point for God at any time. And I know that alcohol was a big factor in our horrible marriage that caused us to feel a certain way. My sons, God had blessed me with 3 beautiful sons. Was 25, so I don't get him up in the morning anymore. But Nehemiah and Asher, to be able to love them and know how to love them the way God taught me, I cannot even begin to tell you how much joy that brings me. And when they say, I love you, Daddy, or you're the best daddy in the world, I almost missed out on that. God gave me that. God gave me that love. To have love for my wife, to love my wife as a woman, as an educator, as a mother. And God working through all my crap. I had a line of crap for God to take away. As imperfect as life is, to love a woman for more than her, anything a male would want. And knowing that through any trial and tribulation that Satan throws at our marriage, my wife will be the person I'm with when I take my last breath. That's a gift from God. I'm undeserving of a lot God has done for me. And I can go on for another hour of what God's done for me and still probably not fill the list. I was pulled aside by one of my coworkers one time, younger than me, much younger than me, and they pulled me aside. And he's a Christian, and he gave his life to Christ. He pulled me aside and said, I want to tell you something. And I said, what's that, kid? It's been a real pleasure working with you since you gave your life to Christ. I didn't do anything. I didn't go into work thinking, okay, I've got to be a Christian now and start treating these guys nice, or start being nicer when they mess up, or I did nothing. Whatever he saw was God breaking through me. Sure, I stopped cussing. Sure, I stopped throwing fits when I was angry, but he saw something more than just that. That was a nice gift from God to let me hear that. God's given me the gift of testimony, which is why we're here. To be fearless of anybody's judgment because of my bad decision making. Because I am delivered, I am forgiven, and I will love you when you judge me because God put that in me. So now I can go out to the public with a heart full of love to want to tell people about my brokenness. What Jesus did to that, it made it go away instantly. I say yes. I believe. Everybody has to know. No matter what you've done in this life, that if you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, He takes it away and forgives you. And I hope everybody gets to know that. I want to tell everybody. And I do. And I remember when I first came to the Foundation's gathering to commit to being a member of the church. Pastor Zoe led that. Then going to your Five Alliance men's group Bible study on Monday nights. I had a list on the back of my Bible, no, in the front of this Bible, sorry, of people that I testified to. It may be stranger at sheets, not the whole story, but just to see somebody hurting and want that hurt to go away and be able to approach them and say, I've been you. What do you mean? I've been shattered. You shattered me. Something ticked you off. Something this, something that. And be able to say, Jesus took that pain away from me. And share. And sometimes get shoot away. Sometimes be holding somebody. Or they're thanking me, and I said, please don't thank me. Thank God. He loves you. And I love you. And if it's on my heart, bless him in some way. And knowing that God will take over from there. And the list became into the gosh, I can't even put a number on it. Countless people I've shared Jesus with. And a lot were in the same spot I was. They thought if you had sinned, you will be condemned for life and be judged and blamed that. And that's not the case. Our God is a God of love and forgiveness. And I want people to know that He's not a God of hate and judgment. That's the guy down south. And hell, that's the enemy. I can sit here and think a ton more.
No, that's all right. I think we've got it all. I think that sums it all up right there. And it is, the second video is now over 50 minutes. You done?
Don't pause that yet.
Okay, go ahead.
For you watching, God is waiting with open arms. He loves you. Let me be the living proof, because I would not be here without God. All you have to do is surrender and say yes. And I promise you,